Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. We are continuing our conversation from before about MVPs. We're missing Paul, but I am here with Connor and Cameo. I'm sure that in comparison to the last episode, viewers are going to notice some differences in the studio. So just wanted to call it out now. It's much prettier, yeah. Which is exciting. This is cool. I'm really looking forward to seeing the rest of the progress. Even between like yesterday when we started recording, there,
the paint
walls are changing colors. It's cool. It's way cool. Anyway, let's talk about MVPs. So we're going to start with examples of successful MVPs, and there are by the time that anybody hears any of these brands, Dropbox, Airbnb, Instagram was originally Bourbon. Like there's all these different things that they have a lot of recognition for, but most of the time the story of where they came from is not apparent, right? Most of the time, by the time you hear about Airbnb, it has already got 1 million users on it, usually. Exactly. It's an established product by then. So just want to kind of talk about the story of how these started up. And we actually have a really cool clip regarding Airbnb that one of the founders was, where was he talking? What was the context of the where he was talking about this?
I always just assume everything's on Lenny's podcast.
It was like a Stanford Business School lecture.
Yeah. And he's just up there.
Yep.
Okay, so this I haven't heard this.
Excellent.
And
you might have heard the clip.
You might have heard
the clip. Maybe.
We'll see.
I started it and then
now we can get a better reaction.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Investor that Joe and I ever met was in University Cafe, this cafe. An investor walks in. He goes to get a smoothie. He sits down. He never picks his head up. He's drinking a smoothie. He's like on a straw, drinking a smoothie. We're pitching him. Halfway through the presentation, he gets up because he has to move his car. We still haven't seen him since. So that was our first pitch. We pitched Paul Graham at Y Combinator.
Nice.
We ended up getting Y Combinator. The first question Paul Graham asked me is, people are actually doing this? Like staying in each other's homes? And I said, yes. So the second question was, well, what's wrong with them? The interview kind of went downhill from there.
That's honestly a good moat.
Over the course of
if other people think it's insane, but people are doing it.
We're about to leave our interviews, and Joe takes out a box of cereal. And a box of cereal we designed. So we'll take a quick detour. We provided housing in 2008 for the Republican and Democratic National Conventions.
Yeah.
And you remember that was when Barack Obama was running for president. It was like a huge movement. And that weekend, we launched, and we got 80 bookings. And I thought at this point, we've made it. We're huge. A bunch of blogs covered us. We're like the Beatles of tech right now. And then all of a sudden, the next weekend for Senator McCain, we got 2 bookings. And then the week after, we got no bookings. And I realized if only there were political conventions every week, we'd have a business. So we were called Airbed and Breakfast. The Airbeds weren't selling. So we said, I know what you're thinking, why not breakfast? Mm-hmm. And so we created this Barack Obama and John McCain themed breakfast cereal. We called the breakfast the Obama O cereal, Obama O's, like little Cheerios, the breakfast of change.
Breakfast of change.
About John McCain, and he was a captain in the Navy, and I thought, oh my God, Captain McCain's. A maverick in every bite. So we made these boxes.
These guys are designers for sure.
You're definitely unemployed. This is just not a good sign. And so we ended up designing these boxes. We called General Mills, hey, can you make 100,000 of these? They're like, please don't ever call us again.
How did you get this number?
So we ended up, I'm making that up, I can't remember who it was, but some big cereal company. So we ended up getting 1,000 boxes of cereal. We hand glued them ourselves. I remember hand-gluing cereal boxes, these collectible breakfast cereal, thinking, I wonder if Mark Zuckerberg ever glued cereal boxes. And the answer was no, he didn't. This is not a good sign. But we ended up making $30,000 of collectible breakfast cereal. So we basically said at that point, we're cereal entrepreneurs. And that was how we funded the company. So we are in this interview, Paul Graham. He's like, what's wrong with you? These people, why are strangers staying together? And when we leave the interview, we give him these boxes of cereal. And he said, what are these? And we said, we made these. He goes, why did you make these? company because no other investors give us money. And he said, well, if you can figure out how to get people to pay $40 for a $4 box of cereal, maybe, just maybe, you can figure out how to get strangers to live with each other. So that's when we entered Y Combinator in 2009 after, a couple dozen investors just thought this was not for them.
I think I've heard this story before too. And he says that they had a binder. Like those binders that you put like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon cards in, of credit cards that they were maxing out. I think this is the same group, the same guys.
Oh, sorry. I can't. So the local car company, what's their names? Vanderhall.
Vanderhall.
Yeah.
So the people who started that, they have a sheet company in Logan. I saw a thing. They totally did that. They had over $1 million in credit card debt that they were carrying. That they personally that they would move. And they were constantly moving it around. He said they had like a full-time person whose job was to move around the credit card debt.
Just flip. Oh,
and
page 7.
Go find that credit card because they couldn't get anybody to invest them. And they're a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, I think Airbnb was the same. They said at another time they said they made hundreds of thousands of dollars selling these boxes of cereal.
Yeah, they went in $30K and they
turned
it all around. It's interesting. I knew the story, but it still doesn't quite register that it was airbeds and literally air mattresses.
Literally air mattresses.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about their MVP. They were renting out their apartments with airbeds on the floor. And people have to be pretty desperate for a room to sleep on an airbed on the floor. And I don't even know how indicative that is of like the business model that they have today. Most of the bookings that people that they want a whole house to themselves. They don't want to share a room.
If I am sharing space, I've done a few Airbnbs. Sometimes like up in Park City or when we do visits to like Vegas or whatever. If I am sharing space, it is kind of like it's weird being in the kitchen with strangers, But if I have an external door, I'm down. Whatever.
Yeah.
I have a theory that people who wear shoes or flip-flops in their house are more likely to Airbnb in open spaces.
Okay.
Interesting. Now that's
do you wear shoes in your kitchen?
No, I don't.
Boom.
No, I don't.
Damn point.
Not in my kitchen.
It's like, can you imagine like being barefoot in a kitchen with some person you've never met? That's like so intimate.
Yeah,
it's too much.
But
if I'm wearing my shoes or my sandals, I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
I could run if I had to. That's what it is.
Start bringing Crocs.
I had never heard this story before, and it makes me wonder a little bit about them as a company and what actually made them take off. I don't know how much traction they had before they joined Y Combinator, and
not a lot. And
the thing that Connor could probably speak better about what you get out of being in Y Combinator. But so much of the narrative around Airbnb makes it seem like they have a website, they get traction with their website, which shows them that there's a market, and then you imagine this hockey stick kind of success after that. But in fact, the reality is they did have some early success, validated that people would in fact do that.
Yep.
But they hadn't actually nailed their value proposition at that point.
Yep.
And which is what I'm assuming Y Combinator helped them do.
Yeah, two thoughts. One, I'll talk to the Y Combinator in a second, but that's like the most power. You are like so ultimately powerful in that moment where you have done something to validate a value proposition or a problem to be solved, and other people say that's insane.
Yeah.
Because something they don't, and they're going on their gut, and you're going on hundreds to potentially thousands of people saying, no, I would do that. And so they were infinitely powerful in that space because they knew something. They actually knew something. They didn't believe something. They were starting to know something that other people thought was insane.
Right.
So when they get into Y Combinator, I love these guys because they're both designers. So it's very interesting to see.
Give your background a little bit on Y Combinator.
So I just had a startup that was I used to be really good at this one-liner, but I'm not anymore. So I'll suffer through this. It's an add-on. It's a piece of IoT hardware that adds on to existing door opening motors. And it would use Bluetooth to range with someone's phone to open the door when they're within range.
It was an accessibility.
Kind of social venture, which is a great place to be if you can make money doing social good, because you can raise loads of money doing that, including Y Combinator. So we were really early successful. We went to this massive accessibility conference where like 500 universities were at this convention center in Orlando, Florida. And we got on the floor for free because someone local liked us, and they put us like on the back, right? Like we're facing away from the door on the end of a row. And but everyone else there was like selling e-readers and software to make your website accessibility.
Okay. Yeah.
And so everyone sees us, and we're like young guys. Some of my founders are really good looking. One of them is Italian, very suave, and so all these people are just very excited. And we got like 100 commitments for to be paid beta users.
Oh wow!
For universities who are buying 200 to 500 units a piece and then paying a monthly fee. So we took that to Y Combinator with a couple of local people in Utah who've been in, and they said, yeah, this is a shoo-in, and we got in. So I would say the story for Airbnb, the thing they got the most, from what I can tell, there's loads of things you get, loads of connections, lots of time with investors. The Paul Graham used to do his blog. He still does. If you're interested in startups, you should be reading Paul Graham's blog.
Mm-hmm.
It looks straight out of like 1997,
mm-hmm.
like pure HTML page.
Yeah,
and it's like solid gold. The new series are good too. With I can never remember the new guy's name, but and even so they're all good. But the thing that he told Airbnb was the do things that don't scale, right?
Uh-huh.
And he said, "Oh, you're never gonna just track against every convention. Like you should just go find." And the idea was like you should just go find like the craziest apartments you can that are so beautiful but not occupied. And then they tried that. It didn't really work. So instead, they tried the eBay marketplace kind of thing. And Paul Graham said, you should go to every person's apartment and take professional photos.
Oh, interesting.
With a real camera. Uh-huh. Instead of like, this is the time of like barely an iPhone era.
Right. Yeah. 2008.
It's like a really crappy, like 2 megapixel camera that they're bad at it. Yeah. So they went and they would fly places.
And light them professionally.
And light it and like have a decent $500 camera at the time. And that made a huge difference for them. And that doesn't scale. No. They said they did like 100 to 200 times and they hired someone to do it to like 10,000.
Well, it's interesting because that like built a market. Now short-term rentals are a whole thing. It's a whole different thing, than just a regular landlord.
Yeah, they like innovated a business model.
Yeah.
Them and Uber and kind of this like, we love it. I love it because of this whole decentralization idea. Like they pushed margin to the edges.
They do.
They like broke up this market and said, oh, hotels, sorry, like everyone gets to compete here, not just you.
Yeah.
So that was awesome.
The interesting thing to me also about this clip is there's somebody I posted today on LinkedIn about if you're a founder, you have to be a seller. You have to be able to sell. And you think about like what it takes to sell a $40 box. Like they didn't get into Y Combinator because they had a well-validated idea, which I think is a lot of times what we tell ourselves, right? They had successfully nailed the concept behind MVP. They got into Y Combinator because they were creative and they were figuring out how to sell something that wasn't even related to their business idea. Like that's
right.
And listening now, like, is this guy a stand-up comedian, or has he just said this 1,000 times?
Probably both.
Probably both. And maybe I mean, maybe he's just that. You'd have to almost get to know him to know whether how much of that was taught. And but it's just an interesting story.
Yeah, that's so that was like our first example. There's a few, Dropbox was a similar thing. I don't know a lot of Dropbox's story.
So here's Dropbox's story. They had a belief about people storing things in the cloud, but really it had never been done before. Not really. I mean, It was not something that was happening at that time. So they built a demo video of a proposed bunch of functionality. They had not developed any software, but they made these demo videos and showed the core functionality of Dropbox, which wasn't just that I can save something into the cloud, but that I can then access that from any device from anywhere in the world and have it be like real time.
Were they targeting?
Which now does not seem that remarkable.
Right.
This is like 20 years ago.
Yeah. Were they targeting businesses? What was who was the market
That's a great question. I honestly don't know. I know they got a lot of really early traction based off of that video,
right?
That allowed them to get funding to build it because they didn't have.
Also YC backed, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so too. But I don't know that.
Interesting.
Now I want to go, research.
Yeah, me too.
But file synchronization wasn't technology that existed at that point in time. Microsoft didn't have it. Like nobody had. I remember the first time I got a Dropbox account, and it was like really, really cool because you had a phone already, but your phone couldn't get to the things that existed with your computer. There was no cross-device accessibility like common at all. So
and now it's like
before AirDrop.
Exactly. Before AirDrop, before Google Drive.
It's still hell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. So let's move on to some failed ones. Some sad stories, unless you have more.
Well, I think Uber's.
Uber's a cool one.
Here's Connor kind of glossed over this or went right past this point, but it's, these companies are notable because they are change makers, right? Like Airbnb didn't just have an app that'll let people, share their house. They changed what it meant to go and travel.
Yeah.
It's where travel no longer took place at a centralized location. It's decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
Uber's the exact same thing. The stranglehold that cab companies have had on travel when unless you rent a car, you have complete dependency on the cab companies. And, the mob kind of owns that.
Yeah, I try not to speak on anything the mob owns, especially when they no longer have anything to lose.
Right.
They've lost it all.
They lost.
No, that's right. And I think that looking back, it's crazy to see how the stars aligned. Because I don't think that they were sitting in a room and they were like, oh, you know what? This opens up the world of opportunities for where anyone could go vacation.
No way.
It creates experiences like a local. You can have a local experience wherever you go now. I don't think they're thinking that. Like,
right.
They just like happen to see. I don't even know they're thinking like, oh, hotels shouldn't have a corner on this market.
No,
Uber maybe certainly is way more obvious to me that like, oh, cabs suck. We hate working with cabs. They always gouge us. Like, they shouldn't own it.
Yeah.
But Airbnb was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you could just like find a place to stay anywhere?
Well, and like he talked about in that clip, when they really started to realize it could work was the RNC convention, the DNC convention, right? And where it was like these events where everyone needs to be in one place, regardless of hotel, or like you can be in the suburbs, you can be wherever you need to be to get there. And then they're like, well, we need conventions every day to make this happen, So being able to pivot from there.
I think we should also talk about Instagram because I've heard a lot people say how cool it's been to watch ChatGPT and their adoption and how quick the adoption has been. And there's that like adoption through history. Instagram, they got to 1 million users within a month of their release. Now, that was a pivot for them from what they originally were, which was mostly a location data kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you could check in and location. I think we talked about this a little bit.
A little bit.
And then they realized that it was the people sharing the pictures that people were actually excited about. Somebody just came by and threw their glasses at us. It was the craziest thing.
Anyway. Locations.
But then they pivoted because they weren't getting traction. And within a month of that pivot, you talk about like seeing that you are actually getting some real traction, and then like it took off from there.
Well, even to that point in the decentralization of industry. So one of the things that Instagram did that really caught on was, one, it allowed people to crowdsource marketing. Now you have influencers, you have people that are doing sponsored or partnerships, things like that. And the original part of Bourbon, the location data, is specifically what they're using to feed marketing material to users. Like it's a core part of the function of the whole app. And it makes it really so you can get really targeted ads in all social media now, right? But this was one of the first times when they really leaned in on like leverage the location stuff. I think I got on Instagram for the first time in 2012, and the first picture I ever posted was like on a road trip to Oklahoma. I was spending a summer out there.
Bless you.
And so I just have this random picture in Kansas, and to this day I can still go to that post and see where I was, and it's like I want to go back there now.
I had heard once that as appealing as Instagram was for Facebook for the just the engagement that it had, that it was actually the location data that they were buying the entire thing for.
Yeah,
because they knew they could see from a marketing perspective what that was going to provide them.
Yeah.
And they always buy with the mind of how are we going to use this. So.
Well, and it's that thing where you get to change what marketing is, right? Before these companies are building out personas and trying to get their content to specific people. First time I ever did Facebook ads, I was kind of in shock because it was like, oh, I can pick men from 22 to 32 in this county that are into these 5 things and feed it directly to them.
Yeah.
And that was the sum of the parts of Facebook buying Instagram and all of that. And to this day, that's still, something that if you want to just lean in and only do marketing via social media, you can decentralize anything now.
Although Apple's made it a lot harder for Facebook to do what they want to do. So.
Yes, they have.
We actually should have a separate episode really just about like the impact of that ability to target marketing, because I think it's changed the world more than people even comprehend. And it's just a really fascinating topic to me.
Yeah. Similarly, I feel similarly. It's funny. I dated this girl years ago, and she was in marketing, and she went to a conference, and the day that they went, they had like a whole day on Facebook targeted ads. And she came home and she was like, that was the spookiest thing I've ever learned. The amount of stuff that they know. She was just like, I don't want to be on Instagram myself anymore. So she pulled out. But it's cool because, the more data, as a data person, I'm always going to say this, but the more data I have, the better. It depends on what we're going to do with it, but we can be so much more successful the more data that we have access to.
Well, and, just to go a little Web3 here, I think for a lot of the people who get really passionate about Web3, it's that component. Like, I actually want targeted ads.
Right.
I love ads that know what I like to buy.
Yeah.
I think it's super awesome. I just want to be able to decide who gets my data and how it's used, and then I want to be able to monetize it because somebody's making a lot of money off of me, and it should be me.
Right. Yeah.
Even in the form of even in the form of discounts, right? Like if I could sign up and instead of them having to pay the ad company for all my data, they could just get it from me and they gave me a discount, that'd be great. I would do it.
Yeah, totally.
In a heartbeat. And it doesn't even cost them. They like literally just save money and get more sales.
Well, the other part to Cameo's point, like I've envisioned this before where all of my ad data is stored somewhere on chain and I rent it out to whatever company. So for the same reason, so I can get relevant ads to me. I'm more inclined to actually shop that way. But the other issue, and this is Apple's thing and how they're getting in front of Facebook right now with these monolithic companies, all of that data is there, whether I consented to it or not. And it can be and has been genuine security issues because of that, because they, all these data brokers that exist where they gather as much as they can on you and then sell it to Facebook or the government or whatever they're doing. That future protects us in that way. And
I agree.
So someday we should build that, guys. We should get on. We should get all over that. Let's talk about failures.
Let's talk about Quibi.
Let's talk about Quibi. Yeah. You first. I'll talk. I have a lot to say about Carvana. So we'll get to that one in a second.
Well, Quibi is pretty notable for the amount of money that they lost and the amount of time that they lost.
I barely remember Quibi because it was like a blip. They were a video.
9 months. They were like between Vine and TikTok. Okay. And really they were trying to make short form like mobile video. They spent either 2 or 1.8 billion in 8 months. The people who started it were like Meg Whitman, who was the former CEO of I can't even think of what Meg Whitman was the former.
Excuse us while we furiously
everybody Google or Chat GPT.
Quibi is what she's known for now.
Poor Meg.
Was an executive in the Walt Disney Company.
Oh yeah, she ran for governor.
HP, and then Jeffrey Katzenberg is the Disney executive. And Katzenberg, he's quoted as saying,
"Oh, she was the CEO of eBay."
Yeah, she's like legit. They were so unbelievably arrogant. They knew that they believed that they knew exactly what people wanted. Katzenberg is quoted as saying something like, "We don't even need to talk to people because we know that this idea is so amazing."
Yeah.
And it maybe was, right? And who knows whether this was in 2020. This is not that long ago, right?
It felt
like it should have been so long ago.
Yeah, I mean, they had the perfect opportunity, right? Everyone was stuck at home because of COVID, and
that's why I don't have any memory of this.
Still didn't work.
This was one COVID ago.
Has blamed it on COVID.
That should have made it better.
Well, go tell TikTok, who gained 1 billion followers during COVID, because they didn't seem to have the same problem. So
in September 2020, just 5 months after its launch, Quibi was considering sale or acquisition with a valuation of $500 million, despite its $1.75 billion initial investment, having failed to meet subscriber targets. Coverage.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Dude,
wouldn't it be nice? Let me just take a couple $1 million CEO role to waste $1.5 billion.
It's so shocking. Think about how many good, cool things we could build with that.
Yeah, I mean, I needed like a 1/100th of that to build something amazing.
Yeah, and when you think about MVP, like I haven't seen actually a very great analysis of what their early stage product development and validation looked like, because it would be really interesting. It might have been. It's not uncommon to see this for startups. They actually validate an MVP. They see that people have demand for it, right? You probably don't just dump $1 billion down in something if you don't have some belief that it's going to have traction. But you sure can screw stuff up even at the traction point if you stop believing that you need to continually talk to and iterate with people. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, we had product market fit right at the beginning. Well, where did it all go wrong? Well, you believed that as you continue to add features, you didn't need to go back and revalidate those assumptions again and again and again and again. But I don't know that that's exactly what happened to them.
Such an interesting case. I was kind of looking through some of the analysis that they've talked about. And so there's an article in LA Magazine that is literally titled, "Insiders Say Quibi May Have Been Doomed from the Start." and they go off to explain it. My laptop.
No, I sat through 3 or 4 layoffs at Ancestry in 6 years, and hundreds of people, like from 7 to 14% layoffs each time of engineering staff, and it was kind of always the same story. The 2 that are most memorable are, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but as product managers talk, and product managers love validation, and so one we called. What was it? Me-gintainment. It's like trying to be genealogy social media.
Oh,
Gintainment.
Okay.
The worst
that's a bad
part was
idea.
I feel so bad dogging some of the executives for this, but just one in particular kind of, I don't know. Anyways, I remember because on the first slide it said me-gintainment, and then it had a trademark, like superscript, TM.
Okay.
And so then we started trademarking everything unofficially.
Like anything would ever use that word.
Yeah, me-gintainment. Oh, dang. Got him.
So hot right now.
So anyways, they ended up at like 75 people working on this thing. That this one executive was
Like
so
a pet project.
convinced it was going to work. And the lead product manager and I were pretty close at the time, and I would ask her, because they were using a lot of our services to try to do this feed thing. I'd be like, oh, well, what are customers thinking? She would say, oh, they hate it. I'd go, why are you working on it? She said, well, I was promised I wouldn't lose my job if it fails. Like, wow.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's comforting.
Well, I'm not going to finish that.
It's comforting for her.
She didn't. But all the time she would meet with me because I had loads of services that they wanted to use to make this thing, to fill the data. And I would say, well, what's the feedback today? Like, what's the next iteration? And for like 9 months, this went on. And they never had anything where she said, yeah, this is good. It was always, well, we made these changes and but people still don't really care. And then like 75 people were laid off.
Who had been hired to do this thing.
Hired or had chosen to go over there. Ancestry has a really great internal work movement policy. And so you could go, you could be like, oh, I would think that's cool. I want to go work on it. And then you could go. And so some of them did.
And they didn't, there's no going back, right?
Nope, there's no going back. And luckily Ancestry did the thing a lot of companies don't do, which is fire the executive first.
Right.
First.
Which is rare. Mostly
usually they get to hang on a little longer than everyone else, just spin it down. And then the same thing happened. They had another product, health product, DNA health product, same thing. I think they made like $200,000 after spending almost $20 million in marketing.
So there's this really great article.
And you didn't hear those numbers from me.
No. In fact, I'm trying to gloss over
numbers.
any corporate secrets. There's this really great article by, do you guys know who Scott Galloway is? He's an NYU professor of marketing, and he has actually a really great newsletter. But he has an article it's about WeWork specifically, but he talks about great corporate failures. And he uses this number that he calls the daily Benjamin burn.
Interesting.
Like if you go and you look at the Quibi thing, they burned through $1.2 billion in 8 months. He says their daily Benjamin burn was $2.2 million. That's how much money they were wasting every single day. So then he starts to compare this across a variety of things. And because he's talking about WeWork, he has Newman's loss as the CEO of WeWork at $13.1 million a day. Okay, but do you know who the winner is for the greatest loss per day of any corporate thing ever? It's Steve Ballmer when they bought Nokia. They were $22.2 million a day was what their Benjamin burn was.
You think he was sweating?
Ballmer
just picked it up.
He's
That's
such
funny.
a sweaty
That's
man.
funny, man.
He's such
You've
a
never
sweaty man.
seen the developers. He's just dripping sweat.
So sweaty. Oh man.
Was
That
he
guy was not
sweating?
made for.
That's
He was
super
made
funny.
for the Pacific Northwest for sure.
That is super funny.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That
I'll
is
share that article. It's super
crazy.
interesting.
So I think that it's interesting to talk about what actually kills some of these companies, because we've been Cameron and I have been really heads down on this. Like, what stops companies from actually innovating consistently? And the hubris, we've talked a lot about some hubris of executives, but there's, you didn't actually validate, or you maybe did validate, but then you skipped a phase in the middle, right? Like, instead of you wanted your validation curve to be a hockey stick, and it just wasn't, right? I think that happens to a lot of us.
Yeah, especially if you can exert money pressure and see growth.
Yep.
If you spend enough money the right way, it can really deceive you into believing
Yep.
that you have something that's a much better idea than you do.
And maybe your messaging is great, which means you validated something.
Right.
Like that, maybe the problem or the thing, but I don't know. That means your product solves the problem.
Well, and maybe that last part is the hardest thing. Like, your
Yeah.
MVP can tell you that there's a problem or there's a desire, but then if you can't pull off the execution, like if your usability is really, really poor, kind of going back to that cool story about Airbnb where they went out and took professional pictures. Would they have ever gotten to the growth if they hadn't invested in changing the experience for the users, right? Like, the market was there, but they needed to be able to execute in such a way that could engage the market that they wanted, because they had to be able to compete with hotels who use
Yep.
professional photographers.
Well, that's such an interesting case, because now that is what the short-term rental landlords do, right?
Everybody does it.
So the founders of Airbnb kind of went through the steps of what I would do if I owned property that I wanted to rent out on Airbnb. You get the property, you take beautiful pictures of the place, you get the content ready. Like, this whole process that they did is now the flow of a short-term rental landlord. Like,
Right.
they have to mimic that flow, and that's what made it so successful, right? They
Mhm.
finally invested in the user experience, and now the users do exactly that thing.
Because they've been trained, but also because if you go in and list a property, they will give you guidance all the way
Right.
through. Here's what you need to do to have a successful rental.
Yeah.
I did some work with this group that works with Tony Robbins a couple of years ago. And Tony Robbins and this educational group that they have had bought mastermind.com. Great URL. They spent $1 million on it, with the goal that if you're part of the Tony Robbins, like his top tier people who kind of pay into that top tier, a big thing that a lot of them are doing is taking their expertise and then making courses around it, right? Kind of replicating that Tony Robbins thing. They found the same thing. They built this whole e-learning platform for these people who have all this expertise to go in and build all their own courses.
Cool.
But just because you have expertise doesn't make you a great course person, right?
Right.
And so they had all this content on mastermind.com, but they couldn't get anybody to come in and engage with it because it wasn't the kind of quality that people expect because they needed somebody to go in and do all that training that now a lot of people get when they go in to build their Airbnb page.
Yeah.
Because it's actually the interesting part of decentralizing. you can't just like say we're going to have people do things that people haven't traditionally done and expect for people to come and buy it for them if they can't replicate the professionalism that we expect from that kind of a service, right? You're not going to go rent somebody's house if the picture doesn't compare to the hotel picture, right?
Yeah.
Also, we should have a part of this podcast where anyone can throw out a crazy startup idea at any moment.
All right.
I have a
ready.
few.
Right.
No, I'm just saying based on what we're talking about. It's called B&B GPT.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Here we go.
You ready for this?
Yeah.
And literally, you put a picture of your house into it, and it doesn't even use GPT. It uses Midjourney, and just makes beautiful pictures of a house that doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah.
And then writes an Airbnb article for it. Right, writes it all up. You could probably do an interesting art. I'm sure there's products out there that you post about your house, and then it makes a listing for you.
Pre-built.
Actually,
Pre-built.
Like,
Yeah.
now you have it.
Oh yeah.
pre-build it.
Now and then we send out to an email list of investors who we just scraped off the internet. We have no contact with them. So you should invest in this B&B.
I'll tell you what, on that idea, I think you might have shared or commented on something on LinkedIn where it was somebody went through their house and took like, I don't know, 40, 50 pictures of their house.
Oh yeah.
And then the AI went and built the thing. If you do that and then have the AI act as a professional photographer and go take beautiful pictures of your home with the lighting and stuff just by you walking around for a little bit,
Love it.
that would sell. That would get
if you
users.
had the 3D images of a house, you could put that into Midjourney in a heartbeat and say, make me photorealistic copies of this that are beautiful and the perfect lighting.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it would do it.
Yeah,
I the last house I sold and then my rental, we spent a lot of money having professional pictures taken. And the guy's great. He
Sure.
is.
Yeah.
We'll call it mid-century modern journey. I'm so good at naming companies except our company, unfortunately, because we still don't have a good name.
We're close, man. We're close.
Blast off. Let's go.
Blast off.
I've got a really good one. Let me just share it really quick because you're gonna laugh.
You get it.
Are we still having a podcast here?
No, we're validating. If you think this is a good idea and you
This
would
is
invest
it.
in us, then let us know.
This one's actually about ancestry. So a while ago, I had an idea to do a dating app that would link to your ancestor 23andMe data.
Just to make sure
So
you're
you
not
could
related.
filter the type of people that you want to swipe
That's
on.
maybe awful. I
It's-
don't know.
Yeah.
How do I respond to this?
I don't know.
That's
Could
perfect.
go either way, you know?
I'm into it.
Probably not.
Something Freudian about like only for third cousins, you know?
Yeah,
Not second
yeah.
first, but like third is like a safe zone.
Let's avoid relatives.
Hey, listen, even in the US, marrying your first cousin is totally allowed.
Yeah, you just have to be
It's-
sterile.
No, they don't
Oh,
even
God.
require that anymore. The geneticists have found that there's not actually problems with people marrying their first cousins.
I'm not willing to swallow that thought.
I'm not saying
Come on, don't we?
I'm not processing that thought very well.
Really, you know,
this went off the rails a
from
little bit.
B&B GPT to whatever we're
Marrying your
calling
cousin.
that.
That's so good.
Yeah. DNA Tinder, huh?
DNA Tinder. Ouch.
No, but it's back to this thought of like what kills the startups. Like this idea, even this idea of B&B GPT, like, oh, cool, that could maybe work. And I'm sure there's like 10 of them already. But it's this idea of your validation. And whenever I've done so many interviews, and the thing that's always interesting to me is how people describe the process of discovery and validation from like idea or problem all the way through to delivered. And that's why I love the double diamond, because it's a very linear looking shape. And I think that a lot of us hear about TikTok and we're like, oh, their validation was not linear. It was like parabolic or logarithmic, right? They like had something and all of a sudden it was hyper validated by users in a moment. And I just don't think for the average company that happens. I think honestly, it's probably like a low sloped curve.
Yeah.
Where you're not getting as much validation as you would like until you finally find the thing, and then your slope goes up somewhat. And if you're lucky, it goes up a lot.
So let's kind of go to the side a little bit, because the last many years, what we've seen is a lot of money dumped into growth.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the growth that we've seen is artificial growth.
Yeah, I think that's an effect of the internet. But go on.
Grubhub, all of the delivery services, artificial growth because they're subsidized by the pricing is not accurate
Yeah.
to what the cost of the item is. And so I honestly think it's a little bit dangerous to look at growth as necessarily a validation. If you're subsidizing that growth in any way, shape, or form.
What did John Richards say? You can buy $2 million of ARR with enough funding. That's what he said when he came to speak to us.
I think you can even buy more than that with enough funding. I worked for a company that was spending about $5 million a year in its advertising to get $20 million in revenue, which isn't awful.
Not bad.
But all of the revenue would churn out within a year. So there's no sustainability in the business model.
Yeah.
Because, but they still sold the company for $350 million to.
Because they're bringing in 20 a year, and yeah.
And someone looks at it and says, "I could do a better job than they are."
Right.
I could fix churn. Right.
Yeah. Right. And the revenue doesn't necessarily tell you what the actual costs are or what the profit is. Yeah. So, it's pretty easy to say, oh, $5 million in advertising for $20 million in revenue. Maybe that's not so bad, right? Yeah. That must have a profit margin. But if you're also spending, depends, how much you're spending in development, how much you're spending in marketing, support,
sales.
Heck, the fact that the company was churning every ounce of revenue that it was getting every year, probably, I know for a fact, had an enormous cost on customer support, on it was all kind of based on a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. The Carvana case is interesting to me because I think COVID was kind of what put it down. Because it was when all of the used car market blew
exploded.
Up. Yeah. Because superconductors became very hard to get a hold of.
Right. New cars were hard to get.
Yeah. Yeah. So used cars were where the money is. It's so interesting to me. So people watching this don't know, but we're very close to the Carvana building that's for sale now. Right. For
a stone's throw.
Yes, a stone's throw would shatter that building. They've listed the building for sale for $7.7 million. Thanks, buddy. $7.7 million for that building. I cannot think of anything else you would use that building for.
Who had the cookie idea? You guys heard this idea? Utah is also known for the cookie wars.
Yeah.
Thanks, NBC.
Yeah.
They said you should have each floor be a different cookie company from Utah, and you should make them so they can rotate right. Whichever cookies are the best gets to be at the top floor. And so then you can get in the middle and go up the little elevator in the middle, and then they all have the same formulas as we've learned.
Right.
So they all need the same cooking
cookies.
material, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's just the same kitchen. You just move the branding up and down.
That's pretty funny.
That's my other idea, sharp idea.
Also,
we're taking investors all day.
Imagine being a startup and convincing yourself that you needed to build that building.
A vending machine?
Yeah.
In China, they have those everywhere. But they're parking garages and they're rentals, like Turo-esque thing.
See, if that was a rental company, it would make way more sense to me.
There's no chance they validated that, right?
I can't.
You mean buying the building itself, or building the building itself, or the business?
The vending machine.
Yeah,
somebody would actually.
The vending machine in Utah County, Utah.
Yeah.
That's the issue here, right?
Yeah. Well, part of
Shanghai, China, where you have no space.
Yeah. Part of what they're talking about in the value of the building is that this particular highway has access. You are exposed to 177,000 people a day. No, but that's their value prop is look, almost 250,000 people drive past the building.
2019 gray Toyota Camry up there.
Clear up there.
Oh I gotta have it.
Yeah, right.
If it were a rental company, it makes more sense, but there's no way that it's sustainable. Like you just can't.
You'd want your rental company probably right by your airport.
Yeah, exactly. That,
and the tenant improvements on that to turn into anything else has got to be astronomical.
It's just such a dumb way to spend it.
I guess even Teslas, you usually will test drive a car, but like I can't. I used to sell cars, and the idea of
I could see it.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
It's like my first job. The idea of trying to sell a car to somebody well, I guess you can see it, but you're not driving it. No one would ever. They would laugh at me if we were on the floor. Like there's no one validated that idea. I just can't believe it.
No one did.
So what are we at for time? Are we wrapping up?
Yeah, we're about there. 50 minutes.
All right.
Did we come to any conclusions of like
what's good and what's bad?
Put a bow on it. Like what should people actually be doing? How do they?
Well, one thing is we're talking about MVPs in different flavors, right? We've got the startup where we're trying to figure out a solution to a problem. Okay. One of the things that might be interesting is for instance what I'm doing right now. The tools that we're working on, I'm not selling them, right? This is just part of the package that our customers get for their internal tools. What I'm realizing, because we spun up this team, we started working on the solution to this problem, and I think we have landed on a great solution. We're building something cool, but really what I'm doing is I'm replacing the MVP. There is internal tools here, the quick and dirty hacks that make the business move forward. That is the actual MVP.
No, that's a great point, and you are replacing the MVP. I think. Here's the danger when you're replacing an MVP. Early users have a tendency, I don't want to say fall in love with the features, because it might be that it was a dirty hack. It's probably not the best solution. But your users end up with a little bit of bias, where I think the most challenging thing when you're trying to move past MVP into like a long-term solution is getting your buyers to fall, or your users to fall out of love with the existing solution, and be open to the idea that the MVP itself needs to be constantly kind of growing, or the product itself needs to be growing. And this isn't necessarily about features. Sometimes the best thing you can do is reduce your features, right? And get really laser focused with those users on what does it take for them to actually be like the most successful using the application.
Well, and you posted something on LinkedIn that I commented on a week or so ago about exactly this, where my biggest concern is cementing bad business process right now.
Never automate a bad business process.
Right, exactly. Because then you end up with that story of, we made a quick and dirty solution, it'll work fine. And then 3 years later, we put some systems around it. So now you don't have to click on something, it does it itself. And then another 5 years later, you've got someone coming in going, who built this? Why is this way?
And why do we need 30 people to maintain this unbelievably janky? It's the equivalent of like a crickety table that someone's got. I mean, it's.
Yeah. So that's my caution right now is, there's different kinds of MVPs. There's different goals, right? You're building products, building solutions, building internal things. Like sometimes you're just trying to fix, like a business analyst is just trying to fix one problem by itself in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a just fine strategy, but sometimes you can build entire systems around problems that the solution would have been better if you changed the business process first.
Well, and I will say, I'm just a believer in leverage the people who are using the stuff that you're trying to build. And the biggest mistake people make again and again is they stop talking to the people who they're trying to help. It's just so unbelievably easy to jump from talking to somebody all the time to running.
Yeah.
Running forward with, I've figured out a solution. Oh, I figured it out, right? And then you stop talking to them because you figured it out. And then you're like, here, I figured this out for you. And they're like, no, either you should have taken me along on the journey so that I had a crosswalk of like a bridge that could take me from the thing that was in the past to the thing in the future, or you made a bunch of assumptions about me that were wrong. And the way I'm using, like, here's what else you didn't know about the business process that's keeping it broken. And you've come in and given me a solution that doesn't acknowledge the brokenness of the business process.
Yeah, absolutely. Even now I'm dealing with some of that because you think you've got 2 users and then it turns out there's 7 different kinds of users.
Yeah.
It's like, oh crap. Okay.
Right.
We got to restudy
Right.
this.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought I had it. I thought I knew,
Yeah.
but I didn't.
Well, I'm hoping that this has been interesting for our viewers. One thing that I did want to mention, if any of this conversation has got you thinking about projects that you're working on or got you excited about trying something like this, we do workshops on this. We do talk about product market fit. We'll do assumption mapping. This is a big part of us as a unit. And so we'll figure out some actual contact details so that people can reach out to us if they want to do some of these exercises.
And the very best place to reach out to us would be our Discord, where we're building our community.
Yeah.
Because all of us are participating there, and like we respond to messages there.
Yeah.
Or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast.
Yeah.
Or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast.
All of that. So we'll get those
But you
contact
have to be
details.
legit.
Exactly. You have to be a
Very legit.
real business. I'm really looking forward to our first guests that I've been working on for a little bit.
Lovely.
Get soon over here.
Yeah.
Another Y Combinator company. Like
Okay,
it
yeah.
should going to be awesome. So we'll get those contact details in the YouTube or not the comments, but the description. We'll get it wherever it is you're watching your podcast, so you can come and talk to us and see what you guys think. Thank you so much for listening to us ramble on about this stuff. Again, this is Connor. This is Cameo. I'm Dallin. You guys have a good day.